Thank you for joining us again. After lunch, thank you for joining us again as we finish up day 2 of the joint appropriations hearings. I think we have Commissioner McMurray online with us already. Commissioner McMurray, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, Senator. Got you loud and clear.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for starting our afternoon session. The floor is yours.
All right, we'll get the presentation brought up and I'll begin. But I thank you both, Chairman England and Tillery, and members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. It's my honor to be before you today on behalf of the GDOT Board to present the Governor's budget recommendation for Amended 21 and 22. Today with me, socially distanced, is our Treasurer, Angela Whitworth, our GDOT Budget Director, George Christensen, Carol Comer, our Director of Intermodal, and the Director of Planning, Janine Miller. So glad to have them in the conference room with me here today. Sorry we couldn't be there with you physically. Today, I plan to share with you some accomplishments from FY20, highlight some data and trends we're seeing as it relates to traffic, which ultimately turns into revenue, and of course, go over both amended budget and FY22 full budget. And then at the end, highlight a little bit of our intermodal program. We've had several requests to just especially talk a little bit about intermodal in a little greater detail. And I think part of that's obviously related to the Freight Commission work that was finished late last year. So with the next slide, we'll jump right in to some of our outcomes for 20. I always like to highlight the bridge investment that the state continues to make and thank the legislature for their appropriations of putting investment into bridges. Even though less than 3% of our bridges are in poor condition, which is a great number, we still have over 1,500 bridges that require replacement. So there's still work to be done. I also like to highlight the dollar volume of work that was done last fiscal year. Some 301 projects were bid, totaling $1.27 billion. And I always like to remind you of that work that Carl Vinson Institute did regarding transportation investment in Georgia, of where they said that 1 million of investment basically returns $850,000 of indirect investment to the economy. So if you take that 1.27 billion that we bid to construction last year, that will yield another 1.1 billion in indirect benefit to the state of Georgia. So again, we did that despite COVID-19 going on and, had a really good year. Also, just a little bit about the work that went on during COVID. As you can see, we acquired almost 1,700 parcels to advance transportation projects and assisted local governments with almost 600 parcels, resulting in an expenditure of over $232 million in buying property. And I highlight that because obviously buying property during COVID was quite a challenge, and we had to change our methods and use calls like this with Zoom and meeting people online instead of at their kitchen tables or their businesses. But our right-of-way team did a great job to continue to advance projects across Georgia, right-of-way projects across Georgia. And also it takes our many professional services contracts, our consultant services, to help do all the work that's necessary to do to advance projects. And we had over 1,044 contracts valued at $555 million to advance projects, basically to do the make-ready work such that we can ultimately build the project. And probably one of the things, not probably, but indeed, one of the things I am most proud of is GDOT's effort to help in the COVID-19 relief. We've had over 450 resource requests from GEMA, and those resource requests are often hauling supplies and providing traffic control and the like for all the efforts for, the testing sites and now working into, vaccination sites. And so we're just glad that we can be a small part of the state's COVID relief efforts. And so just wanted to highlight the great work of the GDOT team, but none of that can happen without the great men and women of GDOT to get it done. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just give you an update on sort of our head count. We're very proud of our men and women of GDOT that always are focused on making it better. As we closed out last calendar year, 3,664 full-time employees. That is certainly down from the prior year. We are working hard to try to backfill and get that number back up to about that 4,000 number. And as during COVID-19, like every agency has done, we have embraced teleworking. In fact, about 43% of our staff are now teleworking at some frequency, and most of those are almost exclusively, 5 days a week at this point. So doing our part to social distance and keep the spread down, but also been very effective in doing so, as I highlighted on the first slide. We're averaging about a turnover rate of about 17%. And just to give you some numbers of what that looks like, last year we had 615 people separate employment, which means we had to hire back about that amount to try to keep our head above water. All right, now let me move into talking about some traffic volume comparisons on the next slide. This really is some great data that I think you'll see how it translates into revenue ultimately. This first slide, and let me explain it a little bit, is a comparison of rural state routes and rural interstates this year as compared to last year. On the left side of your screen are percentages, and the arrow at 0 means that the traffic would be exactly the same today as it was a year ago. And so it's the percent difference in traffic volumes from the current date, and the dates are across the bottom of the slide, versus a year ago today. So what you're seeing, a 0% change means traffic's the same as it was last year. And as you look at the dark blue line, which is rural state routes, the light blue line are rural interstates, you can see that we are at or above the same traffic volume as we saw last year. And you can see on the far left, as you look at those dates back into April, we saw some 50–60% reduction in traffic. And now you can see that traffic volume has not only returned to normal in recent times, but is above normal in recent times. So this is a great trend to see. I think it's a reflection of Georgia's economy and people out moving about. The next slide is a similar comparison, but it's looking at urban state routes and urban interstates. So if we go to the next slide. And I joke around, this is not my EKG, this is actually traffic numbers. Now you can see the purple is urban state routes, the red is urban interstates. Again, the arrow at 0% means that traffic would be the same as it was a year ago, same date. And you can see that the urban traffic volumes are lagging behind of what we've seen in the rest of the state. But the good news is over the last few months, back into October, first part of November, those are trending somewhere 10% or less pretty commonly. Now you can see some very big spikes. Those correlate to holidays and weekends. The biggest spikes are holiday traffic. And if you got good eyesight, you can see that at the bottom of what dates those correlate to: Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, etc. So we're seeing the traffic come back in the urban area, mainly Metro Atlanta. And we're now seeing some congestion build in predominantly the afternoons. Mornings still not so bad unless it's a crash involved. But the afternoons, we're now seeing congestion build back, just not quite as long as we were accustomed to pre-COVID. Let me move into the next slide, because this next slide really tells the story about how the supply chain has reoriented itself and how reliant all Georgians are now on home deliveries of some sort. These are truck volumes, not percentages. So the orange is the current truck volumes on interstates. The gray was the same truck volume a year ago. And as you can see, all but at the very beginning of the pandemic, the orange line is above the gray line, which means there's more truck volumes on the interstate than there was pre-pandemic. And again, I think this shows us that the supply chain and logistics companies are resilient. They figured out how to reorient and now are moving more goods on trucks than ever before. And I think, again, it's a good indicator of economy as well. Okay, so we've looked at traffic trends. Now let's move into consumption, because traffic drives consumption. This next slide is gasoline. And so comparing all the way back to 2018, and the goal line is FY21, the red line is FY20. And if you follow that red line, you can see the effects that COVID had, the pandemic. And I might add that the data on this slide lags 2 months, at least 2 months. So it may not correlate exactly as you would think consumption would happen because of the lag in the data. But you can see the red line of last year, budget year, in the sort of heart of the pandemic there, March and April. The good news is you look at the gold line now is in July, we started with consumption slightly above, and now consumption is tracking very much like pre-pandemic FY20, which is a very encouraging sign. The next slide is to take a look at diesel. Again, FY18 through 21. The yellow line is FY21, as we just saw with those interstate truck volumes and freight, knowing that freight deliveries are up, that's correlated into an increased consumption. As you can see that we're now tracking at all-time highs in diesel consumption as compared to the previous 3 fiscal years. Again, another good sign. So now let's take traffic, consumption, and then talk about revenue, because that's where it all comes together. On the next slide, we'll look at revenue collections as it relates to excise tax. So for year to date of fiscal year 21, our levels of revenue are 0.1% through December above what they were in FY20, again, pre-pandemic. So motor fuel excise collections are tracking very much like they were pre-pandemic. Collections have actually been above last year starting in October. And you can see these bar charts. The blue bar is 2020, the orange bar is 2021. So you can see since October, excise revenue has been up a little bit more than it was last year, another good sign. The FY20 audited collection amount totaled $1.933 billion. And I remind you that what's collected in 1 year and audited is then appropriated in the next budget year, which would be budget year amended 21. The next slide deals with revenue, but it deals with the fee component of revenue that comes to the Department of Transportation, or in total, transportation fees. Hotel fees as compared to last year, down 29%. That's probably no surprise. In fact, I think that was actually a pleasant result, not being down any further than that, comparatively speaking. As you look at the blue bar chart, that's the hotel fees that were collected in fiscal year 20. The orange are what has been collected in 21, which total about $64.5 million through December. The hotel fees are projected at the end of this budget year to be $82.3 million. So you can see we've put a projected bar there to show what those numbers look like. As it relates to highway fees, this year they're up 33% as compared to last year. And if you notice there with the gray and sort of the yellow, the smaller bars, you can see that usually in January and February, we see some bumps historically in those as well. So we'll keep our eyes on those revenues as they continue to come in. But all things said, again, I think this is a positive story. Even with hotel being down 29% from prior year, I think that's a lot better than anybody probably could have forecast or predicted. I will give you just a relational number. In FY19, the hotel fees were about $180 million. So we still are, far away from what we were in FY19, but all things considered, look like we're tracking very well. All right, let me step away from all this data and provide a federal update on the next slide, just to again remind you that about $1.6 billion of our total budget comes from the federal government. In December, the Federal Funding Transportation Act, or the FAST Act as it's called, was extended through this federal fiscal year. It actually had expired, but Congress extended it, so that's good news, and we were funded at FY20 levels, so that's good. And as a reminder that just in December as well, as part of the congressional action, the COVID funding relief bill was there as well, which actually did include funding for state departments of transportation. It's estimated that Georgia will receive about $322 million additional dollars over what was appropriated through the FAST Act. It will be distributed on a formula basis, which is very good. And 14% of that goes to the metropolitan planning organizations. It requires no federal match, and it's been able to go through 2024 as far as when you have to authorize that money. Now, we're waiting the further details from Federal Highway to understand all the details of how we can use this money. Our goal is strategically to use these funds for projects that help keep Georgians working and that benefit the economy. Sort of going back to that Carl Vincent study, we want to make sure we deploy these dollars strategically. That's good for Georgia. Now, I said we're waiting on guidance. We got the guidance last night from Federal Highway, so we've got some homework to do. And we will keep all the committees informed as we go forward about how we plan to utilize these additional federal dollars. Also, the COVID relief funding had Federal Transit Authority dollars, about $34.5 million coming to Georgia. The majority of that will be utilized by to the ATL and utilized by MARTA. And then we're still waiting the exact determination from Federal Aviation Administration about how many dollars will come to Georgia with the probably insight that most of those dollars will go to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, of course. So just wanted to give you a quick update because it is a big share, about a 40% share of our total budget, and to keep you abreast of what's going on at the federal level. Okay, with all that talk, let's jump into the budget on the next slide. We'll start looking at the amended 21 revenue information. And we use, of course, FY21 as the base. You can see that motor fuel was increased by $159 million to $1.902 billion. What we call non-excise, meaning anything but self-excise, $34.3 million were added to bring us to $131.7 million in fees, or non-excise, let me correct that. You can see that we backed out the dollars that go to the ATL or to Greta to basically get at the bottom line of what the GDOT budget is based on the base, the change, and the amended recommendation for 21 is $2.034 billion. To give a little perspective, this is certainly good. The excise amount increased by about 9%. And so that's a good thing. Hotel fees, impact fees were all kept level. So no increases anticipated at that point for those. So that gives us the total budget of $2.03 billion. So let's look at where those dollars will be used on the next slide, please. We always like to show this chart to aggregate our budget programs into functional buckets, if you will, so that we can see where the dollars are actually being used. The largest share, about 48%, are in the capital projects category, which consists of 3 budget programs: capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads administration. The next bucket, or the next bar there, is general operations, which is 5 budget programs consisting of construction administration, that's the work that it takes to get projects ready, the departmental overall administration, data collections, planning and traffic management. Next is the local maintenance improvement grant at 190.2, or 10% of excise, which obviously is given out through formula distribution to cities and counties, a fantastic program. Next is routine maintenance, which constitutes 21% of our budget for the purposes of taking care of Georgia's roadways. Next is payments to CERTA, which represents about 4% of the budget. And intermodal is about 1% of the budget. And GO bond debt service, the last bar there at 104 million, is about 5% of the budget. So this is, again, aggregation of sort of where the dollars are being used. So when you add the capital projects and the routine maintenance and the LMIG, you can see there's a lot of work going on across the state, and we're very proud to try to use those dollars effectively for those purposes. On the next slide, let me walk you through sort of the major changes to the amended budget year. At the very top of the chart, you will see GO bond debt service. And again, this is only motor fuel. So let me make sure this is clear. This chart, we're looking at where motor fuel is being used. The GO bond debt service change is due primarily to a fund source swap of about $40.2 million and an overall debt reduction of about $5.8 million in the amended year. So debt went down, and then we're also able to swap some motor fuel for transportation fees. The next major change is the second line down in the capital construction budget, which delivers projects. This was an add of $52.6 million. That brings us to a total of about $792 million. It's slightly less than last year's or fiscal year 20's budget, but very close. And these funds will help us to deliver projects that may have been deferred if we did not have this amended budget. So this will help us keep projects going and not have to slow down some of the projects we thought we might have to. You can see next is a $95.6 million add to capital maintenance, which really fully restores our budget to FY20 levels. So that's good because we can keep the state of good repair moving forward for our roadways across Georgia. You can see an increase in LMIG to true up the amended motor fuel to get to 10%. And then finally, you can see a $35.1 million increase in routine maintenance. And this gets us back close to where we were prior to pandemic. This gives us the ability to go back and do more striping, do more litter pickup via contract, and certainly more maintenance contracting to small businesses. So we're very excited to be able to take these additional revenue of motor fuel and do some meaningful things with them. The next slide is a breakdown of the non-excise dollars, basically fees or general funds. And the first line is the GO bond debt service. As I just mentioned, that was a fund source swap of about 40 million. Less the 5 million in debt reduction gives us 34.3 million or 34.4 million in GO bond debt. Intermodal did not change. It stayed the same at 21 million, and payments to CERTA stayed the same at 75 million. So that's where non-excise dollars were used. Now let me move into the fiscal year 22 revenue comparison on the next slide. So we're moved from amended 21 into 22. Similar format. You can see that excise moves to $1.96 billion, an increase of 216 million. That's about a 12% increase and about 2% higher than back in FY20 pre-COVID. So, again, seeing those traffic numbers come back, I think gives good assurance that consumption is going to continue, which turns into revenue. Looking at the non-excise, which is fee and state general fund revenue, increased by about $32.3 million up to $129.6 million. This change, if you see the ATL there, you can see it in the base being deducted and then add it back. That's due to the administrative attachment of the ATL to GDOT from prior year's legislation. So in total, FY22 totals about $2.089 billion, which is about $55 million more than the amended recommendation I just shared with you. So let's see where those are used on the next slide. Pardon me. So again, an aggregation of the main buckets. Again, the biggest bucket is the capital projects at about 46%. General operations stayed at about 11%. LMIG is at 10%, which is slightly more due to the increase in excise. Routine maintenance is about 21%. Intermodal stayed at 1%. As you can see on the far right, we do now have payments to the ATL in there, as I just mentioned about them being administratively taxed, so they now show up that way in the budget. Geo bond debt service is about 7%. So let's move to the next slide. And I'll give you the breakdown of where the changes are based on budget program for motor fuel. So in geo bond debt is actually increased about 15.2 million in motor fuel. We had the ability to increase that, excuse me. So there's an increase of about 15.29 million in motor fuel. And I'll talk about the rest of geo bond debt on the next slide. Capital construction, 99.4 million. Let me go back a slide. Sorry about that. Let me finish on the previous slide. Thank you very much. So in capital construction, we added $99.4 million to that program. This will allow us to deliver even more projects and about 6% more in capital construction than we had in Amended 21. While I'm on capital construction, I want to highlight a couple of initiatives that you may have heard about. The governor mentioned in Eggs and Issues, and I'd like to give credit to Janine Miller, our Director of Planning, for these two initiatives that are called out in your budget. Let me highlight those. The first is on freight, a focus on freight operations, where this initiative will assist with improving road and bridge facilities that are heavily traversed by trucks for some small scale investments that can address safety and enhance efficiency of freight movement. I think you all probably can look around the state and see where there's some needs for freight movements or tractor trailers that, you know, some small projects could make a big difference. So we're excited about having this new capability as it relates to freight operations. Also, the second initiative is a rural development initiative, and these will be deployed to transportation improvements unique to rural Georgia, and specifically targeting like roadway safety, the potential to add broadband for transportation purposes that could be also used by local governments or unserved areas, and also work in to develop innovative solutions, especially in and around grad sites. So working with Department of Economic Development and as opportunities present themselves, these two initiatives can really be a game changer and be very effective and efficient as it relates to making improvements as it relates to freight operations and rural development. Each of these programs represent about a $10 million investment. $6 million in state and about $4 million of federal will be used in each of those programs. So just wanted to highlight those as they're noted in your budget. So let me move into the sort of next major category is capital maintenance, added about $45.3 million there. And then you can see some small adds in our admin programs, which help us take care of some of the administrative needs of filling vacancies within the department, as I showed you on those earlier slides. And then routine maintenance basically stayed the same as it was for for fiscal year 21 amended. Now, the next slide, please. We'll move into the fee component of the budget. In geo bond debt service, we previously did not have fees paying any geo bond debt, but we added 19.4 million fees. That will help us and help reduce some of the change in motor fuel from the previous slide that you saw for debt service. So the total increase in GO bond debt was about $34.7 million if you add those two numbers together. In payments to CERTA, there was no change. And let me talk a little bit about what that consists of. We did have decreases in GRB debt and existing GARB debt also decreased, which freed up some dollars, basically leaving the budget at $75.37 million in fees. In total state funds were about 79.1. So 30.4 million of that 75 million is due to debt service. 9.8 million of that's going toward GTIB. And then CERTA has a financing strategic plan, a financing strategic for tolling resilience plan. That's a mouthful. Basically a way to consolidate some previous debt that we hold jointly and that can be strategically utilized to reduce some of the existing debt, and especially as the favorable rates that we see today. In fact, some federal bonds were sold just last year, late last year at 1.05%. So rates are very favorable. So this is a good plan, and I'm sure you'll hear more about this when CERTA provides their budget updates. And you also can see, again, $12.84 million for the ATL. Now, intermodal was last on that bar chart, $21.98 million. So let's talk a little bit in more detail about intermodal. The first program I like to highlight is on the next slide. Is Airport Aid. Airport Aid is the largest of the intermodal budget programs at $16.3 million. You can see that there's other funds of about $6.2 thousand. That's, I've been saying millions, $6,233 that come from some of the inspections that we provide for FAA. So a small dollar amount there. And you can see that the 16.3 million leverages $46.5 million as well from the Federal Aviation Administration. So let me take a little deeper dive in airport aid now, because I know there's always lots of interest. On the next slide, you can see our two major initiatives in the airport program is the Georgia Airport Aid Program and the FAA State Block Grant Program. The State Block Grant Program is about $16 million, of which we provide 75%, and then there's a 25% local match for the State Airport Aid Program. And you can see that we have priorities, obviously, of safety and airfield pavement and economic development projects are very important. And we really take a numerical based ranking system when we get projects to determine which projects can move forward. And some of the criteria we use for that is like the number of based aircraft, whether the projects are associated with a primary, secondary, or tertiary runway, the type of project it is. Obviously, safeties are very important, so safety gets a high mark, as well as preservation or capital expansion. And we also provide some additional scoring for projects with economic development components. Again, always focused on, doing the best we can for the economy of Georgia. I might add that FAA usually doesn't give points or considers economic development opportunities unless everything else is perfect at the airport. So the FAA State Block Grant Program is about $54.5 million. It requires a 5% state match and a 5% local match. So it's the 95-5 matching. On the next slide, sort of get at the aviation needs. The intermodal division's done a great job. In 2018, they put out the statewide airport system plan that identified $353 million in needs. In 2019, they came behind that and looked specifically at runway pavement conditions. And we see that our pavement conditions are degrading from the previous report to this one, which recommended about $58 million of capital investment in pavement rehabilitation and pavement maintenance. And then last year, they completed an air carrier study that identified about $400,000 necessary to work on awareness campaign, if you will, about how to fly Georgia and the value of Georgia's airports. And the last bullet there, as you can see, sort of what the annual investment is, federal, state, and local. And I might note the local share is a large share that totals about $103.5 million. So you can see the studies sort of identify the need, and you can sort of see where the state is sort of all in on an annual investment basis. So that's it for airports. Let's move into transit. So Georgia's subprogram for transit provides formula grant funding to transit systems throughout the state, and I'll show you a map in just a minute. The budget component is $3.23 million for state general funds. In transit, we have about 21 positions to administer these grants. And you can see the other funds there, $687,000 actually comes from bus rentals. If a transit provider needs to rent a bus due to bus out of service or whatever, we have the ability to do that from some of the federal surplus buses that we have that come from a federal program. And of course, the federal grant amounts of $45.7 million. So on the next slide shows you a little bit of the complexity. It's not only just one federal grant program, there's several grant programs that we administer based on the different federal transportation or transit grants, that is. We administer these grants to 122 subrecipients across Georgia. And their duty really is to administer the federal grants and provide oversight and technical assistance, obviously help with asset management and safety planning. And also we're required to provide a statewide transit plan as well. In FY21, GDOT's transit funding program comprised of totally about $79 million in FTA, local and state dollars. So sort of that all-in amount between state, federal, and local was about $79 million. I'm also very proud of our intermodal division and the transit subprogram because they distributed over $125 million in CARES Act funding. And again, all those had to be contracts. So we've contracted those with them in record time. As we look at future transit needs, as through our transit study, we identified about $5.63 million in additional dollars needed to implement different things, such as developing a regional transit development plans, to work on rural transit marketing, to continue to develop a rural transit mobile app, and the development of GTFS data, which is the data that feeds sort of real-time information of where transit vehicles are to providers and to the public, and continue to work with the Southern Region Transit Service expansion, trying to expand service into 7 more counties. So that's sort of the unmet need. On the next slide is something I'm really excited to share with all of you about. This really came about from the work that we started back in the Transit Commission work of looking at rural transit that culminated in House Bill 511 at the time. And we've got a great partner in the Coastal Regional Commission to do this pilot project where as long as GDOT with FTA dollars and DHS and DCH are doing a pilot, basically it didn't matter what kind of trip you need, you use an app to get your trip, and on the back side or the back office side, the billing goes to the right federal agency, if it's human services or non-emergency medical or FTA trip. So really focused on the customer, that they just have an app they use to get a ride to where they need to be. And then we figure it out on the backside. So very proud and want to thank especially the Coastal Regional Commission for advancing this as they run transit service in the coastal region. So it's 10 counties that this covers. So very proud of that. Let's move into the next program, which is the rail subprogram. A little over $1 million in funds for that. $88,239 is what we receive from railroad leases. That number goes up and down, some of them based on the type of lease, based on how many cars they move. And then federal funds, a small amount, $616,000. That's from FTA or FRA. That's really about heavy rail oversight, specifically dealing with MARTA, our ability or our requirement to provide state safety oversight for MARTA Rail. We have about 5 positions there in the rail program, so not a big office. But on the next slide, you can see they have a big charge because we own 595 miles of rail lines. You flip to the next slide, please. Thank you. About 465 miles are active, and you can see by the legend which private rail provider operates on the state-owned lines. Having these rail lines in local communities are very important. I think you know that. In fact, I'm told that rail has an impact on 1 in every 7 jobs in Georgia throughout economic activities of railroads, be it suppliers, customers, and employees. So our rail, and obviously Georgia's blessed with 2 Class 1 railroads as well, have a big impact on Georgia's economy. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of historical trend of capital investment back from 2010 to 2011. And when I say capital investment, that's bonds, of how we're utilizing bonds to make capital investments. Starting back in 2019, we really shifted our focus to make sure that we develop projects that increase the current rail line operations up to what's called Class 2 standards. That means that they can haul 286,000 pound cars up to a speed of 25 miles an hour. Now that doesn't sound very fast, but we've got a lot of rail lines that can't operate anywhere close to that. So I'm proud to say that we've got 222 miles now that meets that. Obviously, we've got about 260 more miles that we need to bring to that standard. And we're underway with about another 130 miles to try to bring it up to that standard. So, and I'll speak to some more capital investment on rail at the conclusion. Very proud of the 2020 state rail update. There's a picture of the state plan update in the top right of your slide. And as you recall, in HB 820 from the 2019-2020 session, there were 3 sub-programs added to rail: rail enhancement, rail preservation, and rail industrial plan. And through our 2020 state rail plan update, we identified what kind of projects and dollars it would take to satisfy those programs. And so you can see in rail enhancements, we identified 119 projects at 56.8 million. Rail preservation, of course, is always the biggest thing with any railroad investment: 184 projects at over $1 billion. In the rail industrial plan, 11 projects at $96 million. So as you can see, some sizable needs there, and we're always grateful for the investment in rail. And as I think many of you may have been part of or have seen the Freight Commission's work, obviously short rail and Class 1 rail were big components of seeing Georgia's economy to continue to be strong. So just wanted to highlight those. Now let's move away from rail into the next slide, and we will go to ports and waterways at $1.3 million of funding. As you can see, there's no federal funds there or other funds. So this goes toward us administering and working with the Georgia Ports Authority for the waterways programs that they have. Next slide. And of course, the biggest infrastructure project to date in Georgia has been the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project. And just quick update, it's going really well. The mitigation projects required are 67% complete. Basically, all the navigational type projects are 50% complete. And what most people think about is dredging in the river down in Savannah, right in Savannah, is about 50% complete. But the map on the left actually shows you all the things that have to be done to satisfy the dredging in the river itself that everybody commonly thinks about. So there was a lot of work to be done. Target completion dates February of next year. And so this is a major accomplishment, and we're glad that we can partner with not only Georgia Ports Authority, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on a project of this significance. All right, so that's the end of the intermodal program. And on the next slide, I'd just like to highlight the FY22 general obligation bond request. I want to thank the governor for the bond recommendations. Like I mentioned before, with rates at an all-time low, these definitely can pay dividends. For the roads and bridges category, $100 million was suggested. We have 12 bridge replacements that we're proposing that are in 11 counties. We have 4 capital projects, being expansion projects planned to use in Forsyth County, Henry County, Washington County, and Troup County. And then the short line rail, there's $10 million there, and we plan to deploy those onto the Heart of Georgia Railroad and Georgia Southwestern Railroad. On the Heart of Georgia, about $7 million of that will go to upgrade the bridges and the track between Preston and Vidalia. We're suggesting on the Georgia Southwestern Railroads, which is about 2.9, almost $3 million, again, to upgrade bridges and tracks between Cuthbert and Lynn as well. So that is where we would suggest to use those GO bonds. And we're very appreciative of that because they do go a long way in helping us be successful. Mr. Chairman, that completes a very lengthy presentation. I'll be glad to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you, Commissioner McMurray. We do have a few questions for you. Let's see here. I think the first is from Vice Chairman Gooch.
Hey, Commissioner McMurray, it's good to see you online today. And I guess we'll get into the details of some of this in our subcommittee work in a couple of weeks, but if you would go back to the original comments, you were talking about the federal highway monies of $322 million, I believe it was. Do you have a plan to where that money will be spent first? And as far as the buckets go, whether it's capital construction, capital maintenance, or routine maintenance, could you talk a little bit about that if you have a plan for that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. Yes, our intent would be to use that predominantly in capital construction and capital maintenance. It did have a lot of flexibility to use those dollars, even to pay for staff and payroll. I feel like the amended 21 budget is strong enough that we're good with that. Our goal, again, is to be strategic that we use these dollars in meaningful projects that generate work for the construction industry and the secondary industry or suppliers over a period of time. So we're again, just got the sort of the details of how these dollars can be utilized last night. So we're going to be evaluating that. And I do plan to have more conversation with each of the committees as we move forward about how we best utilize that. So we got some a little bit of strategic planning to still do. We worked yesterday on strategic planning, but now we've got the rules. We'll understand better how best to make use of those dollars.
Thank you. That's good information. We'll look forward to that discussion further. Also, on the amended numbers, it looks like we're restoring most of the money that we took out last year. Given that we're already in the end of January, fiscal year ends June 30th, do you have a plan on where the additional $165 million would go between now and June 30th? Do you have that ready for capital construction or maintenance?
Yes, we would go back in some of the projects we had deferred and pushed out the fiscal year. We should be able to bring those back in. So yes, those they're home. There's a home for those dollars.
Thank you.
Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, with the widening and the deepening of the port in Savannah, are there plans to do a third lane on 16?
Senator, not at this time. We have and continue to make improvements in and around port. Our analysis tells us right now there's still capacity in 16 in the near future, but as we know, and as you know, the improvements in Macon, we've got to finish those improvements at 1675, which we are actually out for bid right now for the next phases of 1675. And we're in the early preliminary work on on I-75 commercial vehicle lanes from Macon up into the south part of Henry County, because there is a need for capacity, freight capacity along I-75. Now, there's another part of that answer that's really important, and that's our partnership with GPA, that we just completed a bridge overpass that allows them to expand their rail yard at the Port of Savannah. and they anticipate putting more containers on trains, which results in less trucks on I-16. So that is certainly a great outcome of what GPA is doing, and again, as part of our planning with them of having those bridges and overpasses over the rail yards, such that those trains are not blocking traffic locally and getting those containers off the road. So we are, of course, continuing to look forward on freight planning. Janine Miller and the planning division will be undertaking the next freight and logistics plan this year. So it's standing up and getting ready to go. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Always looking forward for those kind of things, though, to make sure that we're ahead of the curve.
Senator Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, great job. As I always say, we're lucky to have the best commissioner in the country. One of the slides you had up there showed at one time we had over like 9,100 employees at GDOT, and we're down to 3,500 or 3,600 employees. And I'm all for outsourcing, but I do get a little concerned on losing institutional knowledge if we have a lot of people retire or through attrition. Are you working with Georgia Tech on any kind of internship programs or any programs to try to get people to come across the street and go to work for GDOT?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We share the same concern. You know, we have about 51 employees separate from the department for one reason or another a month. Backfilling that institutional knowledge is hard. So yes, we continue to recruit, and internships we have offered traditionally this last year. We had to dial that way back because of COVID and social distancing. We did do some internships out in construction and maintenance, but yes, we continue to try to do that. You know, these are great jobs. We're very excited that so many big things are going on in Georgia that really helps recruiting for people that want to come work for GDOT. But it's just been a little bit of a slug, as I think everybody understands, of hiring during COVID. I mean, we're doing interviews virtually, but onboarding people and is a little different. And I think that's something that we all collectively, whether it's government or business, are working our way through of how best now to onboard in a virtual environment and share that institutional knowledge or OJT that people possess. So I'm very proud of some of the initiatives our HR folks are doing as well, is really focusing on how to be more effective virtually through virtual meetings and not just meetings, but how to be focused on production. And I would share that too, just a little bit as a side. As we've looked at our capabilities through COVID, we feel really good about the way teleworking's gone from a productivity point of view. We actually haven't really seen a dip in productivity, but I appreciate your notion that we need to continue to have GDOT staff that has institutional knowledge. That is very critical. And like I said, we're aspiring to get back to about that 4,000 number is where we need to be.
One more quick comment, and it's really just a comment. I applaud you for being involved in investment in general aviation. I can tell you from an economic development standpoint, as we continue to recruit these companies, a lot of our smaller airports have a lack of hangar space, and we're going to have to continue to invest in hangar space and general aviation as we recruit these companies that have private aircraft. So thank you for your investment and your continuing to make that a priority. Thank you very much.
Chairman
Thank
Ingram,
you.
I think we got a few online.
Yeah, we've got a couple online, Mr. Commissioner. One is just a comment from Representative Al Williams. He is obviously happy about how good the right-of-ways look on I-16 and 95 down in his neck of the woods. So that's a good thing. Representative Brian Prince has a two-part question, or has two questions. One is, how well did GDOT do on reaching their minority participation goals?
Okay, that's the first question.
Yep, I'll give you the second one in a minute because it's two totally different things.
Yeah, so good timing on that question. We're going to provide tomorrow to our State Transportation Board an update of our semi-annual report for federal DBE participation. which is about 12% is where we met. That is short of our program goal of 16%, but it actually satisfied 100% of the projects we bid. Now, that's part of the story. That's the federal part. And I forget the numbers off the top of my head. I think it's about 60 million or so in federal participation. The good news of that story, though, is the state participation is at over 80 million, if I recall. And I'm giving you a little bit of a ballpark number, Representative Prince. I don't have those exactly in front of me. But as we look back prior to the Transportation Funding Act of 2015, our federal dollar amount spend is up and the state amount is up even more than the federal was in 2015. So all in all, we have a good story to tell there. We are looking again always to try to include more small business and minority participation. That was one of the things I was excited about in this routine maintenance budget being restored in Amended 21 in the same amount in 22, of where we're doing those single source small maintenance contracts, which has a lot of small business, veteran-owned business, and minority business doing that work. So that's where we stand on that. I'll be glad to get the next question.
Okay. And the other was, he's just asking for an update on the I-20 bridge project at the South Carolina line, how that's coming along.
I will be glad to, let me follow up with some actual percentages of where that is. It is running behind, I can tell you that. They've had some issues, obviously, with the river, which can be expected in those kind of things. I think we're running a little behind on that project, but we'll get offline and get you a better detail of what that actually is at percentage-wise and the actual completion date. Of course, a major project there as well, completing that 6-lane into South Carolina, into the first exit in South Carolina with a bi-state partnership with South Carolina DOT. So glad it's underway. And also, just while Representative Prince is there, I commend him and his colleagues in and around the central Savannah River area for the great passage of the next round of TIA last year. A tremendous outcome there. And so more good things to happen in his district and all around.
Are there any more questions from any of the members in attendance personally? So, all righty. Thank you so much, Commissioner McMurray. We look forward to following up with you.
My pleasure. We're here to accommodate any request and glad to help any way we can.
It was
Wish you all the best.
the traffic data was extremely enlightening as well as we look at other trends across our state. So thank you for that as well.
Yes, sir.
Next, we have Commissioner Pat Wilson from the Department of Economic Development. Commissioner Wilson, you're welcome to approach the podium at our left, at your right, and we will hand the floor over to you. Commissioner Wilson, welcome.
Chairman, thank you very much. Really appreciate you guys hosting us today, giving us a chance to come down and see you face to face. It's nice. Feel like it's been too long. So we don't have a budget that is really that hard. We've been very blessed, I think, with the governor's budget, both in FY 21 amended and in 22. And so there are not a lot of adds, and there are no subtractions, which is fantastic after last year. So I'll start by talking a little bit about FY21. We, of course, have been lucky that you've seen a number of jobs and announcements that have happened over the last year. The fiscal year 21 has been really unprecedented for us. And I think you're starting to see that momentum continue to build. We have over 16,000 jobs that we've announced since the beginning of FY21. And that is truly unprecedented. If you think back to last year, we announced 24,000 jobs for the entire year. So if you're looking at half a year with 16,000 jobs being announced, that is an impressive start to the year. And then you throw in the fact that we are doing that in the middle of a global pandemic, that really is amazing. And so I want to commend the legislature, the General Assembly, and the governor for the way we've handled this. I think that we have been really an example around the country in how you continue to grow an economy and deal with a global pandemic at the same time. That job creation is actually up 40% from last year, and our investments are up nearly 50% at $6 billion. And so again, that's just half a year's numbers. And so we're excited about where things are going to continue to go. So the governor's ad for us in this budget, you see it on section 23.9, which is our tourism division. The governor's added $1 million to our amended 21 budget. And the hospitality and travel industry has been absolutely decimated by COVID-19. Pre-pandemic, that industry was about a $69 billion impact statewide. And so throughout this time, of course, we have shut down travel practically completely. Georgia's lost more than $11.7 billion in travel spending, and $627 million in travel-generated state and local sales tax. So travel industry losses are significant, and they're driving up our unemployment numbers. I think I saw the governor announce yesterday, we were in an event together, our unemployment's roughly at 5.7% right now. If you back out hospitality numbers, I think that we would probably be at full employment. Hospitality continues to really drive those numbers. Our partners are impacted the most. And, I talk about this all the time. Economic development is a team sport. We can't do anything without the partnerships that we have in our local communities who really help us maximize our dollars, especially in tourism, because we're marketing product. We're marketing a community. And so if you look at those local direct marketing associations, our local tourism offices, and our local CVBs, they really are our top partners in this effort. So whether you're in Savannah, you're Columbus, Thomasville, or Helen, they've all seen trying times and have faced tremendous cuts. And if you think about it, what drives their numbers, what drives the funding that they're able to put back into marketing, it's beds and heads, it's people traveling. And so nobody has seen this impact more than all of you. I mean, you hear it from your local communities. I mean, these are small businesses in every town in the state. So the governor, as he's traveled the state, has heard this too. And so he put in an additional $1 million in our amended budget for us to really focus on marketing to travelers as we come back to some sense of normalcy. As we see vaccines continue to reach out into the state, and I give Dr. Toomey and her team a tremendous amount of praise. She is a rock star, and I've enjoyed working with her through this process. But as we see those vaccines continue to increase, travelers are going to feel more comfortable and confident, and you're going to see them come back and begin to go around the state. The data shows that people are ready to get out, and I think we all feel that too. Honestly, a weekend in the mountains right now is just a breath of fresh air. And I think you're seeing, our friends in Helen have seen record numbers of people coming back to visit the mountains. We've seen the same in Savannah. So the trends are positive, but we need to capture that because this is going to be a competitive market as every state around us is going to put a tremendous amount of money into doing the same thing, tapping that pin-up travel dollar. So the governor, as I said, put in $1 million into our budget for Amended 21, and what my team is looking to do is maximize that funding by doing 50% that will focus on marketing state statewide, really focused on areas that need it the most, including our rural destinations. And then 50% in matching funds for our local partners. And that can be either in kind or it can be in funding or both, a mix of both. But the plan includes 3 phases of emphasis. We're going to focus on keeping Georgians, exploring Georgia, number 1. During the pandemic, we pivoted all of our marketing to focus on keeping Georgians at home and giving them an opportunity to go see our state parks and really some of the most beautiful places in the United States that are right here in our backyard. And we've seen that. I don't know if any of you have, I even went to Victoria Bryant State Park up in Franklin County when I was home to go fishing, and it was packed. And you're seeing people go out and visit our state parks more than ever. And I give Mark Williams a lot of credit there too. Our team at DNR has just done an amazing job. We have the best state parks in the country. And then secondly, we're going to focus on expanding into drive time markets. And so that would be Florida, Carolinas, Alabama, even up to Virginia. And then thirdly, if it allows, and of course all of this is contingent upon COVID numbers going down, and we're going to continue to monitor that with our friends at Department of Public Health, but we will extend that welcome to other markets around the U.S. based on where people are traveling from. So we use that data to make those decisions. Throughout the campaign, we're going to continue to focus on our public health guidelines, as I said, and hope that we can drive some of these travel numbers back and bring hospitality back in a big way to Georgia. So that's the ad for FY21. And then our FY22 budget, which is, again, it's wonderful to see a budget that doesn't have any major cuts. We only have ads, and the ads are in just general retirement and cost of living adjustments. So, but everything else has remained the same, and we're excited about that. With that, Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions or field any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a few questions. Vice Chairman Gooch.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do for economic development in Georgia. Just an observation from North Georgia. I have a lot of the state parks in my district that you referred to, and actually the RV industry probably had their best year in many, many years. I think COVID-19 drove people out of the house and out of the cities up into the hills, and I think we need to continue to build on that industry. I think $1 million is a good start, but quite honestly, I think it needs many, many more than that. But I'm not sure what the plan is to use that money. Do you have any thoughts on maybe doing some focus group studies with the outdoor recreation industry? There's a lot of different things out, in North Georgia with zip lines and state parks and a lot of private opportunities as well. And also my second question is, what can we do to help the convention business, particularly in the more metro areas and the hotel restaurant business? They seem to be suffering the most in the tourism right now.
Senator Gooch, your question is fantastic, and as somebody who has enjoyed the archery range at Unicoi, and Smith Gall Woods is maybe the most the biggest kept secret in the state of Georgia. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. I love your district. I love the area, and so we're going to continue absolutely to push people into our state parks and utilizing those resources. And you're right. If you look at some of the project activity our global commerce team has had, the boat industry is booming right now. And we just had a location of Correct Craft in Valdosta, where they're building boats down there. This is the outdoor industry is booming, and our team at the department has been working with the U.S. Travel Association to make sure that we're using that data to help design our marketing efforts. And so you're absolutely spot on, and we'll continue to follow those trends and use data to make those decisions. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, $1 million is fantastic, and we're going to maximize every bit of that taxpayer funding. But, you know, of course, marketing you can market as much as you have money for. And so we'll continue to do everything we can with what we have. To the second question, the convention and visitors bureaus, and really the convention business, that is completely stopped. And so this is another place where we have worked with the U.S. Travel Association and the governor has actually had meeting directly with the head of the U.S. Travel Association to talk about how we can bring them back safely. And you know, it is, if you're looking at these massive events, I don't know that we're going to see that right away, but there are safe events that you can do. And I think we're looking at how we can support our communities. And you're right, they are, even the smaller metro areas, though, whether it's Macon and Savannah and Columbus that thrive on convention business as well. You know, we're part of what we're going to do with those grants is help them market to conventions to bring them back. But to do that, I think we're going to have a set of guidelines, and I don't know whether that's going to be state issued or it would be coming out of the U.S. Travel Association to help them do these things, do these conventions in a safe manner. But you're seeing this worldwide, right? I mean, some of the largest trade shows in the world, Domatex in Germany, in Dusseldorf, which is a massive flooring trade show that we participate in every year, is already canceled for next year. And so you're seeing, it really is an industry that is going to take some effort to bring back, but we're absolutely 100% behind our communities in attracting that business back to Georgia.
Thank you.
I think we've got one more question in the audience, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, do you have any numbers where had it hurt the economy with the masters not having the masters? I mean, I know we had the masters, but how much we lost in dollars?
Senator, you know, it's one of the interesting things about our friends at Augusta National is they don't give us a lot of detail as to how many people they invite or how many people actually attend, and so it's tougher to put numbers on that. But we do know that it is a massive amount, and it's had a tremendous impact on Augusta. I mean, we've all seen it. Anecdotally, I know that it is significant.
Couldn't get the mic back on. I apologize, Commissioner. We do have a question or two coming in online.
Yes, got one from Senator Thompson. It's just a comment, just saying great job on focusing on safety, on drawing people back to Georgia in the tourism sector. So I would agree with him as well.
Thank you, Senator.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
That's it.
Fine. There we go. Commissioner, you've exhausted the questions that we have here in the audience and online. Thank you for being here today, and we look forward to working with you as this process continues.
Great. Senator, thank you very much. Appreciate the time of the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Commissioner Williams online already? Mr. Rudolph, we know you're online. We don't know if the commissioner is online for the 2:30 appointment. Can you tell us? I'll tell you what, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll rejoin here and wait to hear from Commissioner Williams from the Department of Natural Resources.